On Christmas Eve, in 1784, Methodist preachers met in Baltimore and organized the American Methodist Church, then called the Methodist Episcopal Church. 35 years later, in 1819, a circuit rider named Jesse Hale preached in Belleville, beginning the Methodist story right here. The 202 years of Methodism in Belleville represent 85% of the time that there has been an American Methodist church. The early Methodists here probably spoke with a Southern accent. In 1818, a year before Hale's visit, a group of 60 settlers arrived from Botetourt County, Virginia. Many were Methodists who would become active in the local church for a generation. The early practices of the Methodist Episcopal Church of Belleville drew on John Wesley's experience with followers who asked to meet regularly with him for guidance. From these meetings grew the Methodist class, which met weekly. The class was a company seeking the power of godliness, united in order to pray together, and to watch over one another in love, that members may help each other to work out their salvation. The class leaders was a key to the Methodist organization. The leader had responsibility to inquire how the members' souls prosper and to advise or reproach as occasion may require. The class and the leaders' meetings were always in the members' homes. Worship services could be held in homes or in a public place like the library. If congregation was large enough, it might meet outside, as it did in 1829, when a worship service held in the woods was, you guessed it, doused by a rainstorm. This experience led to the fundraising campaign that garnered donations from as far away as Maryland, but was largely financed by that group from Virginia. The result of the fundraising in 1831 would affectionately come to be called the Old Brick Church. It was on the northeast corner of West Washington and South 3rd. There's a parking lot there today. This was the first dedicated church building in Belleville and was shared with other denominations. Methodists in Belleville were served by a circuit rider until the Illinois Conference in 1836 appointed Joseph Edmondson to be the president pastor. The Methodists in town now formed a full-fledged church known as the Methodist Episcopal Church at Belleville Station. Decades later, this congregation would be called the First Methodist Episcopal Church. This is the first page of the First Methodist Church records. It reports on the leaders' meetings. Church membership continued to grow so that in 1849, the Methodists built a denomination-specific church at 10 East Washington Street. Some of you may remember that. The church was enlarged in 1876, and the stained glass windows in the top tier of windows above us, right above here, the green part, they were part of this remodeling. Soon after construction of the old brick church, Belleville, St. Clair County and the nation at large were undergoing a demographic revolution with the arrival of German immigrants, of which many of you, I'm sure, are a part. Cincinnati was a hub of German migration, and the first German Methodist church was established there in 1838. In 1841, German Methodist circuit riders began to preach in this area. In 1848, the German-speaking population in Belleville was large enough for a resident pastor to be assigned to the German Methodist Episcopal Church at Belleville Station. The congregation was divided into classes, just like the English-speaking church. The first resident pastor of our church was Henry F. Koenigke, a native of Hanover, Germany, whom the Advocate, that's a local newspaper, called a ministering angel. Why? Because during the devastating cholera epidemic of 1849, he put his life on the line by visiting cholera victims to offer solace and medical treatment. The German Methodists bought the old brick church in 1850, shortly after the English-speaking Methodists left it. They made one more move in 1864 when they bought what would become now known as the Jackson Street Methodist Church, and they bought this from the German Evangelical Church of St. John. This is the oldest surviving church building in Belleville. It was constructed in 1858. The workmanship is impressive. It received its modern configuration in 1911. Here are a few photos of it. When my parents came to Belleville, my sister Joan and I were members of that church. World War I jolted and transformed the German Methodist Church and the larger German American community in Belleville. Assimilation was occurring as the immigrant generation gave way to American-born descendants. But the anti-German hysteria that emerged after the United States went to war with Germany in 1917 led German Methodism to jetson use of the German language to prove their patriotism. They renamed the church the Jackson Street Methodist Episcopal Church. So there were now 2 English language Methodist churches within 3 blocks. Each had its distinctive characteristics, and it took 30 years and some guidance from higher authorities for the 2 churches to agree to unite in 1950. Of similar size, every effort was made to create a sense of parity between the 2 churches. Key to the desired sense of parity was the merger committee, whose deliberations would craft the plan for union. The 10-member merger committee consisted of 5 members from each church. 2 co-chairs consisting of the chairman of each official board, I guess that's you, Marvina, headed the committee. They presided at alternate meetings of this committee. The committee requested appointment of 1 good man to be minister. Not 2, but 1. Pastors of the 2 churches would go to new locations. The committee decided to build a new church here and determined that the unified congregation would be called Union. Initially, morning worship would be held in the Washington Street Church, evening worship in the Jackson Street building. On May 10th, 1950, members of each church assembled in their respective sanctuaries and voted to merge. Winfield Hanbaum was Union's first minister. He was an Illinois boy with local connections. Born near Salem, he had attended McKendree College and married the daughter of one of the earlier pastors of First Methodist Church. He served many churches in Illinois before earning a master's of theology at Drew University. His life was cut short by a stroke in 1952. It was left to his successor, Eugene Leckrone, to complete the Union. He remained at Union here for 22 years. One of Union's first projects in the community was support for the boys at Scott. After World War II, the wartime bonds that had linked Belleville with the base weakened, and particularly after 1948, when the base became home of the Air Training Command, and the influx of raw, young recruits to the base increased. Locals complained of hooliganism, while the airmen felt that they were being exploited by high rents and high prices. Press reports of Belleville being the worst soldier town in the nation galvanized the city into action. And it led to what was called the Belleville Plan in 1950 to improve civilian and military relations. The most famous part of the plan was the GI Pal Dinner, now known as the Bell Scott Dinner. The plan encouraged Belleville's families, churches, and local organizations to become more welcoming to service members. Some people here today remember their families hosting airmen for Sunday dinners. I'm one of them. Union developed a ministry for the boys at Scott, with the pastors providing religious training and counseling at the base and sponsoring social events there. It encouraged airmen to become involved at the church. Union designated Saturday evening as Armed Forces Night and hosted social activities at the Jackson Street building. And here we see airmen attending church at the Washington Street building. In 1952, Union began a financial campaign to raise money to build its new church. The building committee chose the site of the Krontal Castle, right here, Jacob Brocious Palatial Estate. Union opened its new church building on January 12, 1955. Media coverage of this event reported a unique two-phase worship service. The congregation met at the Washington Street building for a closeout service consisting of a meditation, a hymn, and a closing prayer. The last service took place in the sanctuary that had been gutted. The organ had been removed to East Main, and its wooden cabinet would adorn the walls of the new building. All that remained of the organ was an outline against the chancel wall. The sanctuary windows were now in East Main Street, here, as were some of the pews. Following the conclusion of this service on East Washington, many church members carrying their hymnals, possibly even our mother, John, walked to their new house of worship. There, all assembled before the front door on the north side. I presume the door over here. The pastor and choir led the congregation into the sanctuary for a communion service. The economy used in the construction was visible in the sanctuary. Although you can't see it now, the basic building material of the church consisted of some of the same concrete building blocks used in warehouse construction. They were left exposed on the inside walls, but they were tinted blue. Remember that? The back wall of the sanctuary was the back wall of the original church. Phase 1 of the construction was complete. When circumstances permitted, the congregation would demolish the temporary wooden east wall of the church and add an educational wing to the building. That happened quickly. With an average Sunday school attendance of, get this, 300, the need was large. Sunday school superintendent Charlie Woodford described the situation as low-key bedlam. Fundraising for the education wing began in 1956. The dedication of the building occurred in 1960. For 40 years, Union remained at its new location, while the surrounding community changed. New highway systems and the proliferation of private automobiles encouraged urban sprawl. In Belleville, as well as other communities, the urban core became depleted as people moved to new suburban developments. Union considered following the population to the burbs. But of course, this same course had been taken by other churches too. But in 1998, the congregation made the commitment to remain downtown, right here. Although the near population might be diminishing, it still could be fertile ground to increase church membership, because a larger part of that population was unchurched. The church could grow if it developed new ministries to reach this population. Child care, intergenerational programs, food pantry, fine arts were among the programs advocated for the church that would stay in place but expand its mission. At the same time, existing programs, such as the invigorated program of youth mission trips, would continue. The church's physical plant would have to expand to house these activities. The plan to grow in place was called Vision 2000. Work began immediately with the purchase of the adjacent property and what had originally been a grocery store. I remember shopping there. With a lot of volunteer labor, the old building was converted to a new office, food pantry, youth area, and women's shelter resale shop. It was completed in 2001. The atrium, which connected the main church building to the new office, opened in June 2002, completing what was in effect phase 1 of the McKinley Christian Center. And then disaster struck. In August, when an arson fire destroyed the new office while smoke and water damaged the church building. The disaster became an opportunity to accelerate the completion of the Family Life Center contemplated in Vision 2000. Phase 2 of the McKinley Christian Center concluded in 2004 with a new building to house the office, food pantry, gymnasium, auditorium, space for childcare, and classrooms. Union remained a downtown church, but its reach extended outward. To the south, members of the United Methodist Church at New Athens were discontented. They shared a lay minister with a nearby church and felt that they bore most of the burden for church operations. They desired to be a separate church, but knew that they lacked the resources, so they sought advice from the district superintendent, who connected them with Union. They met with Pastor Ed Weston, welcome Ed, and Union agreed to provide administrative and pastoral support and help to the New Athens Church develop outreach programs in its community. Ed Weston was the appointed pastor at New Athens in 2008 and provided oversight, while the recently retired United Methodist minister Ron Chase was appointed an assistant pastor at Union, but devoted most of his time to New Athens. Over succeeding years, church membership grew so that in 2016, when there were personnel changes at both Union and New Athens could stand on its own. Although Union did not move to the suburbs, it did play a role in the suburban religious history. Research indicated that the United Methodist Church might find fertile ground south of Belleville. There were no churches in the Wesleyan tradition there since the Methodist Church left Freeburg in 1982. Freeburg had the largest population in the area, and direct marketing indicated that there was sufficient interest to support a United Methodist Church there. Many of the potential members were young families, so a contemporary worship service was envisioned. As we said in the new church, Journey's DNA was contemporary. The new church would be a satellite of the existing church that could provide administrative and pastoral support. Of the existing churches in the area that had resources to develop a satellite church, Union was the one that had the interest. The result was Journey Church. Journey began small in 2007 at the Freeburg Township building with monthly services led by Pastor Weston, who was assigned as senior pastor. As interest increased, the church went to weekly services and moved to the Carl Barton Middle School. Union's associate pastor, Holly Wood, assumed growing responsibility at the Journey, so that officially she dedicated 80% of her time to Journey. The growing interest in the church and the inconvenience of having to repair a room for religious services and then disassemble it so it would be ready for school on Monday led to the decision to find a permanent solution, a permanent location for a former grocery store. A loan from the Great Rivers Conference funded much of the conversion of the building to a church. Union's contribution to Freeburg then are administrative and pastoral support and apportionment assessments. Journey Church was dedicated in 2012. Inside the city bounds, Union made arrangements to incorporate many members and resources of Hope Church, an independent congregation originally affiliated with the United Church of Christ. Hope Church had been established in 1955 and had developed an ambitious building program that put the church in debt. Reverend J. Krumike, Union's youth director, had gone to Hope in 2006 to become the pastor. But the burden of debt proved insurmountable. To pay off the mortgage and maintain the physical plant, Hope had to curtail programs and reduce staff hours, which in turn affected the church's ability to sustain membership. Because of Pastor Jay's previous association with the church, Hope and Union quickly agreed to bring the two congregations together in 2014. Most of Hope's staff, including Pastor Jay, who became an associate pastor at Union, and many of Hope's members joined with Union Methodist Church. This union has been beneficial. Many of the faces in this photo of Hope's congregation are recognizable here. This congregation, in its various forms, has had numerous meeting places over the last 202 years. We moved about 10 blocks from 3rd and Washington to 721 East Main. We met in members' homes, and we met in the woods, and we meet here now at 721. For now, we can say, finally home. We close with Endlich Heim, a German title, which means finally home, a hymn written by Ernst Margaret, pastor of the German Methodist Church.
Again, it's humbling to stand in this place and to be a part of the history. Anytime we, as pastors, move to a new church, we get to hear these stories. But this is just so eventful and wonderful, as I'm sure Bill and Bill and Ed and all of us have walked in this place and been a part of this. It's Bishop Lewis has to say something, apparently. He's flapping his arm. Yes, Bill. Right?
Marion is the county seat. Belleville was the pastor of First Church Marion. Annual conference was held in 1950. Annual conference was held in 1950 at the First Methodist Church of Marion. W.L. Hanbaum came here. I was appointed to my very first church in Walnut Grove, south of Alamo Pass, Belleville. Same year, started the ministry. And I finished my ministry in the local churches, which is the part of the ministry I love the most here. And I remember W.O. Hanbaum. And I never thought that I would live to see a time when all this would kind of come together the way it has for me today. And I'm thankful I'm here.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks again to our historical group. They have been, as I said, they've been working very, very hard. Especially Bob, who won't ever take credit for any of it, but is still, he is, if you want to know anything about anything of historical reference to this church or Belleville, the guy has it up in his head. I think they're going to, we're going to have to preserve your brain after you're gone, right? That's a long time, 70 years from now. But they've done an amazing job, and we really appreciate their work. I'm going to bless the lunch, and so that we can go and eat, which is a little bit later, so you can kind of hang for a while. God, we are grateful for this day. We're grateful for the food we're about to eat. We're grateful for the fellowship that we're going to enjoy. And we're grateful for you and for your Son, Jesus Christ, who made all this possible. We thank you for those who have walked before us and who will walk after us. We are humbled by that task. And it is in Jesus' name, amen. Go forth and eat. Oh, one more announcement. Tours.
We're going to give you a tour of the church today, starting on the lower floor, right, Bob? And you ready to start? We've got 11:34, 11:35 right now. We can get started. And we have 2 tour times, one which is right now, and the second tour group would then meet at 1 o'clock. So if you don't want to take the tour right now but want to do it after lunch, we welcome you to do that. And the group at 1 o'clock should meet where, Bob? In front of the McKinley Hall? Or where did you want to meet? Yeah, I think so. Okay. Pardon? Yeah, oh yes, and thank you. One more thing. Those of you who have been members of the either Jackson Street Methodist Church or the Washington Street Methodist Church or Union Methodist Church since and or about 1955, we ask you to come up for a picture. Okay? So you just missed the group forming for the, let's give us 5 minutes here. At 11, let's say 11:45, we'll start the first tour here at the back of the sanctuary. Okay?